Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this webinar of the Jerusalem Press Club, JPC, with Tal Shalev, political commentator, who will try to lead us through the political roller coaster in Israel today. Stay tuned to our next webinar at 3 p.m. with the Brigadier General Nitzan Uriel, former head of counterterrorism at the Prime Minister's office, on the situation in Gaza and ramifications for Israel. And then followed by another one at 4 p.m. with Professor Elchanan Baron of Sheba Hospital, who will talk about sharing the information and data and experience in fighting the coronavirus with Palestinian doctors. I want to thank my colleagues at the JPC for facilitating this webinar. Tal Shalev will start with a short introduction, and then we'll open up for Q&A. You're on mute, so please type your questions on chat, and Tal will answer them as we go on. Tal Shalev is chief political correspondent of the leading Israeli web portal Walla News. She has worked as a news editor for the Israeli daily Haaretz and the international television network I-24 News. Tal, please.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. I'll try and sum up what has happened in the past week. I will admit that after this roller coaster of a year, that this has been like a microcosmos roller coaster. But I think the headline is that basically the coronavirus did what three election campaigns couldn't do, and it helped Netanyahu win or complete victory. Basically, we're less than 1 month after the election, which ended in the same deadlock that it was in the second and third round. But the pressure from the corona, the anxiety that the corona creates, and the, I would say, very gloomy expectations for the Israeli economy exceeded the pressure on Benny Gantz to join a unity government. But basically it happened so quick, like I would say like a tsunami. And what had happened is that within a week, Blue and White, which was the most serious alternative that the Likud had in the past 10 years, is totally broken up and dismantled, and Benny Gantz and part of the Labor Party are on their way to join Netanyahu's government. And what we see basically up until a week ago, we could talk about an anti-Netanyahu bloc of 62 seats, which included, 61 seats up until 1 week ago, which included Blue and White, the Labor Meretz Party, Israel Beitenu, and the Joint List. Of course, it was very complicated for them to actually form a minority government, but today that bloc has lost 19 seats altogether, 17 from Blue and White and 2 from the Labor Party, which are on the way to join Netanyahu's government. Now, where do we stand basically right now is that the Likud and Blue and White now is only Gantz's party, what it used to be the alliance between Gantz, Lapid, and Yalon. Well, they split up. Gantz got to keep the name because they have more MKs on their side. So Gantz is basically holding negotiations with Netanyahu. A coalition is probably underway. Most of the issues have been agreed upon, but there are still some very serious stumbling blocks, and the more that these negotiations start to stall, it actually hurts Gantz and his ability to negotiate, because basically Gantz broke up with Lapid, or Lapid broke up with Gantz. That's part of a blame game that's happening between the two sides now, but nevertheless, Gantz doesn't have any cards to play. He's broke. There's no more Blue and White to fight for. So where we stand is that they are in the midst of the negotiations. The main stumbling block is still the Justice Ministry. Blue and White got the Justice Ministry, which is considered a very significant achievement from their point of view, because it, at least theoretically, gives them the ability to try and control, or I would say recuperate, the legal system after these years of the Netanyahu and the right-wing rule. But Netanyahu is basically vetoing their candidate for the job. At the same time, the Likud got the Homeland Security Ministry, and Netanyahu is planning to appoint Miri Regev, and that is causing problems for Benny Gantz, because if at the end of this, Miri Regev, who is known as very vocal and very, I would say, with a very violent rhetoric towards the police, or I would say very supportive of Netanyahu in his battle against his legal procedures, it won't be good for Gantz. It'll be very difficult for him to try and explain the legitimacy of this government. Even more than that, when there's another issue, and that is the issue of Litzman. This government is perceived or presented to be as a emergency government that is being established because of the corona. But at the end of the day, Gantz did not succeed to get the health ministry, which is currently held by Yaakov Litzman, and it doesn't seem like he has significant strongholds that can change the way the government is dealing with the corona. Together with that, what's happening, and another issue that still isn't, that hasn't been resolved, is the issue of the chairman, the Knesset speaker. Last week, Yuli Edelstein resigned from his seat as a Knesset speaker, and basically did that to not disobey a court order that told him that he had to have a vote for the speaker's chair. And now Netanyahu is planning to put Edelstein back in his seat as Knesset speaker. That would create a very big, also, image problem for Benny Gantz. So these are the issues that are still holding them apart. Another issue that still hasn't been decided and is very important has to do with any plans that have to do with the deal of the century or annexation or sovereignty moves. Netanyahu is demanding that there will be a freedom of vote on this, meaning that basically the right wing will be able, there's a majority of right-wing MKs in the Knesset, so that would mean that basically if Netanyahu was to bring a sovereignty move to vote, it would approve, and Gantz at the moment is demanding that he has a veto on that. And to add all of this together, this government is going to be a very, very big government. At the moment, we're talking about 30 ministers in the government. And it might end up to be even more, 34 to 36. This is at the moment we have quite a wide government, and that's 24 seats. And now we're talking about adding another 6 to 10 ministers, in order to create a stable government in which everyone has a seat and sits around the table at a time where at least 800,000 Israelis are losing their jobs, and it's not clear how the coronavirus is going to eventually affect the market and the jobs market. That is under a lot of public scrutiny, the how big the government is. Just last night, we learned that Amir Peretz and Itzik Shmuli, two people from the leader of the Labor Party and the number 2 in the Labor Party, are going to join Benny Gantz in the government. And this is, of course, I would say, another knife stuck in the hearts of anyone who voted for Labor Party or Blue and White. Amir Peretz took off his mustache in the September elections in order to prove to everyone who had doubts that he was not going to join Netanyahu's government, and now they are also joining the government in exchange for 2 ministries. Peretz is going to be probably the head of the economy ministry, and Shmuley will be the welfare minister. at the end of the day, if we look at this anti-Bibi bloc, which means that four parties that their main issue in their elections was to say that they will not sit with Bibi, then at least a third of them, about 20 seats, are eventually going to join a government with Netanyahu. And not only is this government giving Netanyahu legitimacy right now, it's also basically going to give legitimacy for Netanyahu also after the rotation agreement, as he is going to still assume very important roles around the government. So I think that this morning the center-left camp in Israel has been crushed by many, but on the other hand, the right and the center are also the right side of Netanyahu is also not very satisfied because they are not left with very important portfolios. So you see that there's already criticism on the right against Netanyahu saying, this is a leftist government, you're giving up our most important strongholds, you're giving up judicial moves, you're giving up annexation. So it ain't over till it's over, and the agreement hasn't been signed yet, and every minute that goes by, I guess the agreement becomes more risky for both sides.
Tal, first of all, friends, you are welcome to place your question on chat. And Tal, let me ask you, you've been following Israeli politics for a long time. Were you shocked by what happened?
No, I wasn't shocked at all. It was clear from after the election that Benny Gantz didn't have any better option. The idea of a minority government that would be supported by the outside from the joint list was basically politically impossible because of his own internal disagreements to specifically two right-wing MKs, Tzvika Hauser and Yoaz Hendel, who all along the way said that they would not support a government that was supported but from the outside. And another thing that didn't surprise, I think, anyone was the fact that blue and white broke apart. This was a very weird creature to begin with. I think what did surprise us was how quick it happened. And what surprised us was that it was clear that Gantz didn't have any other choice than to join Netanyahu's government under Netanyahu's terms, but Gantz could have played his cards a bit better, and he could have reached these negotiations in a better position than he did now. There was a plan. The plan that they started implementing after the elections was to take over the Knesset and to try and legislate bills that would limit Netanyahu, that would make it impossible for Netanyahu to go to another round of elections. I don't say that Gantz should have went that far, but he gave up on those cards very, very quickly, and then everything happened so fast. So we weren't surprised. I think I wasn't surprised by the fact that it happened, but how it happened and how fast it happened. I didn't expect blue and white to break up like this. I thought they would have a gentleman divorce, and it's far from a gentleman divorce. It's very emotional. It's very mean. There's a lot of anger, and I think that I was surprised at how. I mean, Netanyahu is a genius, as we know, but I was surprised I'm surprised at how unprotected Gantz arrived to this.
It's a lack of experience.
Yep.
Do you think rotation will happen?
No, I don't think that this government will last more than a year. I'm saying this with a very cautious prediction because things change all the time. But it seems like a government that really, really is an emergency government that will be able to get Israel past the corona, in an easier way. It'll be easier to pass budgets and to get bailout programs. And it will also, I think, take off one anxiety less from people who are feeling very unstable. So at least there's a government. But I think that after the corona is over, after dealing with the corona is over, when real issues do come into play, it'll be very difficult for this government to survive on all the issues that are important. If it's the Palestinian issue, if it's the religion and state issue, if it's the judicial system issue, it's just so many different ideas. And we shouldn't forget that at some point Netanyahu is going to start trial. At the moment, his trial has been postponed. But at some point, he will start a trial, and that could also change the makeup of things.
There's two questions from Hannah Barris. One is, except for the lack of room for maneuver for Gantz, what was the real motive of his move? The coronavirus? The second one is, why did Labor jump to join the government?
I think that Gantz, the coronavirus was the excuse, and I think that the coronavirus it gave Gantz the ladder he needed in order to step down from this whole idea. But I think that Gantz, at the end of the day, he was a very coincidental candidate. If we go back to December, when he first entered politics, he wasn't dreaming about fighting Netanyahu. He was dreaming about his plan was to establish a medium center party and become defense minister. And at some point, the dynamics created this whole blue and white party that actually made him an alternative and brought him very, very impressive achievements. But at the end of the day, it wasn't enough to put him in power. And I'm not sure that he was ready to be put in power. The other thing, I think that there was a lot of distrust looming under the מתחת לפני השטח, under the ground,
under the radar screen,
between Lapid and Gantz. Gantz at some point became convinced that Lapid was not out there to help him, but rather just to get rid of Netanyahu. And this and especially the very close relationship between Lapid and Lieberman, who for sure was not out. His quest was not to put Benny Gantz prime minister, but rather get rid of Netanyahu. And third, I think that if Gantz would not join Netanyahu's government, we would probably be dragged to a fourth election. And I'm not sure that Benny Gantz would survive as the leader of Blue and White in a fourth election, which made it the best of very bad options just to join Netanyahu's government. Now, about the Labor Party, is there any way to explain the Labor's jump into the government? It's just that this is the end of the Labor Party. The way to explain it is that Amir Peretz also doesn't have any better option than to join the government. He still has a dream to become president. It's better to do that from within a government. And he believed that in any case he will be, it's his last term. He understands that it's his last term. I think the question should be, why did Itzik Shmuli go along with him? Because Amir Peretz, it's clear that he's at the end of his career, but Itzik Shmuli is a man who is running for a long term. And I think that his jump into the government together with the Blue and White is basically a first step into him joining Blue and White and giving up on the Labor Party. Why did they need this for? The Labor Party has as you know, has a organism. It's a democratic party which have a lot of politicians inside and mayors, and they all wanted the Labor Party to be inside. To Labor Party, who used to be part of the government, part of every government, hasn't been part of government for 10 years, and people want the jobs, they want the access. So I think it's mainly, I would say, small political pressure that push them inside. And do I think this is, well, I think in both cases, I don't like the word treason, but I think that, yes, I think that at the end of the day, if we see that 20 people from the anti-Netanyahu bloc, from Blue and White, and from Labor Party join Netanyahu's government after 3 election campaigns, which were about Netanyahu, I think that, it's the realistic way to to create a stable government at this point. But it's definitely, so a different word than treason, but it's definitely
Treason,
a
treason.
treason. Okay.
Betrayal.
Betrayal.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's
Okay.
use thesaurus to come up with words. What about Lieberman? He was the one who pushed for a national unity government, and now he's out of the game altogether.
So Lieberman has been crowned as the biggest loser of this whole move, because his whole plan in the past year basically went down the drain. And he used to be the kingmaker, and now he's just another party in the opposition. I'm not sure that Lieberman would be even invited into the national unity government, because this past year was not only a fight between yes Bibi or not Bibi, it was also a fight between Lieberman and Deri at the end of the day. Aryeh Deri and Lieberman, who used to be close allies, they had a huge fight, and that has prevented them to go back to cooperate. And during the election campaigns, um, the fights between Lieberman and the ultra-Orthodox parties just inflamed so high that at this point, I don't think that the ultra-Orthodox parties would even invite him in. And I also think that it would do him any good to join a government with them. I think that actually Lieberman, um, from from the from whose he gained some points amongst those who voted for him for not joining another government with Netanyahu and the ultra-Orthodox parties, because this is not a national unity government. This is a right-wing 58 right-wing ultra-Orthodox government with 18 to 20 center-left, but it is not a national unity government.
Do you foresee a scenario where Lieberman joins Lapid in forming a liberal, I'm not saying anti-Haredi bloc, but definitely with some sentiments like this?
Yes, I definitely see it. That's probably one of the more plausible scenarios. These guys have been basically cooperating for years, and especially in the past year or so, they have been in a very, very close connection. So that definitely could happen, to create, I wouldn't say an anti-Orthodox, but a secular, a secular party that could be perhaps, the counter to the ultra-Orthodox party. So definitely that is one of the scenarios.
You said before that you think that if there are fourth elections, Gantz will not be the leader of Blue and White. You suggest that maybe Ashkenazi is the real force there?
No, first of all, I just, if after the third election, there were many voices inside Blue and White saying, well, Benny Gantz has done very well, but it's not enough to defeat Netanyahu. So if we go to a fourth election, maybe we should start thinking about other options. Now, who are the other options? Then, of course, Gabi Ashkenazi is the first name that jumps, but Yair Lapid perhaps would also challenge him for the leadership, since we didn't reach that point in which Blue and White was together, then this is a theoretical discussion. But if we would have reached fourth election with blue and white together, Benny Gantz could have, I'm not saying probably, I'm saying he could have been challenged for his seat by either Gabi Ashkenazi or Yair Lapid. And I think that it would be a legitimate challenge given the fact that he didn't succeed to defeat Netanyahu, but the best he got was a tie. But that isn't relevant anymore since at the moment we're not going to a fourth election, and if we are, it won't be under the original blue and white. So Benny Gantz might continue to lead the new blue and white, but I don't. That's predicting too much forward. What will be in the fourth election, because I don't know when that's going to happen.
We've seen circumstantial parties like blue and white in the past. We had Dash, we had Kadima, the Center Party, etc. There's no substitute for a real party like Likud, isn't it?
Well, you probably know better than me. Yes. Um, the Likud is a very, very special party, and I tend to agree that the democratic nature of it, even though it is ridiculed many times because Netanyahu is no big Democrat, but it does have a democratic nature, and and personal involvement that other parties just do not have. But I think that blue and white at large was a very weird experience to begin with, because it was clear that it wasn't a party. It was an artificial creature that was built um, out of political interest. And at the end of the day, there was only one real party there, Yesh Atid. By the way, Yesh Atid is a growing party. It's an undemocratic party, as we know, but it is the real party given the fact that it already exists 7 or 8 years. It has an organism, it has a mechanism, it has activists all around the country. It has a very, very wide organizational base, which was the base of all of blue and white. If we would go to get elections now, Benny Gantz wouldn't have that organizational outreach at all because it all belongs to Lapid. But I agree that the Likud is probably the most vital and viable party, and the Labor Party used to be that as viable, but it lost it in the past few years.
Yeah, my parents are turning in the graves. Uh, last one. What's going to happen with the Arab voters now?
First of all, I think the Arab voters are going to watch there's I'll start again. There's a disappointment, of course, amongst the Arab voters because there was for 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks after the elections, there was a real, I think, wind of change. And suddenly they got committees in the Knesset, and suddenly they were part of a move. And they were there were just last week. It was quite amazing to see Ayman Oda agree with Lieberman on committees inside the Knesset. And I think there was a glimpse of hope that something was going to change. I don't I don't know how to analyze how this will influence the Arab voters in the next elections because I don't know when the next elections are. But I think that in any case, since the joint list is so big, it has 15 seats and it's going to be very, very dominant in the Knesset. I think that the Arab voters are going to be probably those who will see the most of the money for their vote. I mean, I think that they're going to be satisfied with the joint list. I hope that the joint list will also know how to create, the alliances inside the government that will actually improve things for their voters. But we already know, for instance, that part of the agreement between blue and white, between Gantz and Netanyahu is to cancel the Commentator bill, which is a bill that has to do with lands. That was one of the demands of the joint list. So if the Commentator bill will be canceled, then Ayman Oda can definitely say that this is part of his dialogue with Benny Gantz, and he will probably be able to take credit for that.
There's a question about the Haredim not serving in the army in big numbers. You think there might be a change now with Lapid and Lieberman in the opposition, and Gantz will do anything about it?
I predict that from the government's point of view, there will be a status quo on everything that has to do with religion and state. No side will want to annoy the other side. Of course, they will have an irritating opposition on the outside. You can count on Lapid and Lieberman that they will be submitting bills just to embarrass blue and white and just to create, internal fights inside the coalition on things that have to do with religion and state. But I don't think there'll be any move on that. I also don't think that there'll be, in the upcoming half year, this government will be mainly taking care of Corona and nothing else. And that, of course, is not the first issue on the agenda, even after the Corona.
So the real last question, with the shattered trust of the voters, who's left? Who's the credible politician today? Yair Lapid, Lieberman?
No, I think Lapid is the big winner. Lapid and Yalon. Lapid. Yalon is a different story, but Lapid, yes, Lapid is emerging from this crisis, restarting his career, I would say, restarting his quest to become a candidate for prime minister, because you see everyone almost in the center left who's disappointed with Gantz praising Lapid, saying, yes, exactly, presenting Lapid as the one who stood by his word. Yalon also, in a way, who stood with Lapid against joining the government. Also, they are praised, but if we look at the figures, it's about somewhere between 50 amongst the blue and white voters. It's somewhere between 50-50 and 40-60. At least 40% are disappointed with Gantz and see Lapid as, their leader from now on. And that could change depending on what achievements at the end of the day Gantz will have in the negotiations. I will say very cautiously that if at the end of the day Yuli Edelstein is Speaker of the Knesset again and Miri Regev is the Homeland Security Minister, this will be giving a few more points to Yair Lapid for staying on the outside.
On this happy note, I want to thank you, Tal Shalev, for a wonderful discussion. Thank you all for participating. Stay tuned to our next webinar at 3 p.m. with Brigadier General Nitzan Noel, former head of the counterterrorism at the Prime Minister's office, on the situation in Gaza and ramifications for Israel. And finally, at 4 p.m., Professor Elchanan Baron of Sheba Hospital, who will talk about sharing the information and data and experience in fighting the coronavirus with Palestinian doctors. Thank you very much, Tal, again, and thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.